In this chapter, you will learn electromagnetic energy, the Bohr model, development of quantum theory, electron configurations, and periodic variation in element properties. In this video, you are going to learn about electromagnetic energy, and also called electromagnetic wave. Let's look at, in general, what a wave will look like. As you can see, these are the waves with different shape. Okay, the fundamental one is from one point to the other repeatable point over here. This is called one wavelength. And by the way, this is also called one period over here. So wavelength is the length of one period. We use this letter. It pronounced lambda. So this one, it is period, or it is a. In this chapter, you will learn about electromagnetic energy, the Bohr model, development of quantum theory, electron configurations, and periodic variation in element properties. In this video, you will learn about electromagnetic energy. Look at here. These are the typical property of a wave. The length between one point to the other repeatable point of a wave is called wavelength. And usually we use a letter called lambda to represent wavelength. So it pronounced lambda. Okay, so what about here? You see a letter A over here. So that describes how tall the wave is. For example, if you look comparing these two, over here, A is bigger than over here. The A on top is bigger. So this one is called amplitude. We use a letter A to represent amplitude. Okay. All right. So you usually may have heard about people talk about frequency. So frequency, we use a letter nu. It looks like the letter V, but it's shaped a little bit, bent a little bit. So this one is same as frequency. Frequency means how many wave cycles per second. So it will have the unit of wave per second, or 1 per second. We also call this unit hertz. How many hertz? Let's say if it oscillates 60 times per second, then we call that 60 hertz. A very fundamental relationship between velocity and wavelength and frequency is velocity, or speed of the wave, is equal to frequency times wavelength. Now you may ask a question. So what is electromagnetic wave? Well, electromagnetic wave, it has one side, the electric field property that is oscillating. On the other hand, it also has the magnetic field property that is oscillating. But what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at the spectrum. So the electromagnetic wave will cover the following spectrum. It covers what we typically know as light. So that is the visible area is called light. So what is visible area? Visible, that means the wavelength, it is from 400 nanometer to 700 nanometer. That is defined as visible, or sometimes called visible light. Wavelength smaller than that, a little bit smaller than that, is called ultraviolet. Ultraviolet, lambda, will cover from 200 nm to 400 nm. That is called ultraviolet. And if wavelength smaller than that, we call that X-ray, is over here in this region. And even smaller than that, we call it gamma ray, or sometimes it's called gamma radiation. With these three types of electromagnetic wave, it is called ionization radiation. Why do we call that? Because with these three types of electromagnetic wave, it actually can cut a molecule. Let's say there is a molecule like this. Let's say this is a protein or a DNA molecule. Upon exposure to ionization radiation, it can be cut into two different molecules, into two pieces, and carry a radical electron. That means it's reactive. It can propagate to cut another molecule like this. So we do not want that. That's why in the summer, when we go to the beach, we put something called the UV screen lotion or sunscreen lotion, just to absorb the UV area of the electromagnetic spectrum. Because outside, there will be a very, very small amount of X-ray, so we don't have to worry about it. And there will be a small, tiny amount of gamma, so we don't have to worry about it. But we do have to worry about its UV because it's quite significant. Okay, so what about the wavelength that is larger or bigger than the visible light? The closest one is called infrared. Infrared is also called IR. Infrared, usually it is in terms of heat. And next to infrared is microwave. Microwave is in the right frequency that matches with the rotational energy of water. That's how our microwave oven is based on. And it can heat up the food that is consistent with water. And later than that, after that, that is called radio frequency. So that is the frequency or the wavelength that our cell phone is used to communicate signals. You may ask a question, how do we know that electromagnetic wave or light, how do we know that is a wave? Okay, so there are two very famous experiments to prove that electromagnetic wave, it is a wave and is also a particle. Let's look at this one. It's called the Young's experiment. What it is let's say you have a board over here, but there is a very small hole, and there's another small hole over here. If I have a laser beam that goes through both holes, what do we expect on the other side? Imagine if a screen that is very close to it, then we will expect to see, for example, in two spots, it will be very bright. So if this is a plot of intensity, we expect to see two peaks, right? But in reality, it doesn't work that way. In reality, we will see many peaks like this. At some point, it's brighter than the other, okay? And this is due to something called interference. And anything that comes with interference, it will be considered as a wave, because only a wave will have that property. Okay, so now if we just shine light through this one, we see the pattern. So we know that light is a wave. If we pass UV through it, we see the pattern. We pass X-ray, we see the pattern. Infrared, we see the pattern. So the whole spectrum of electromagnetic wave, we can see the pattern like to some kind. Interference, we see interference. That's how we know electromagnetic wave, it is a wave. We also can pass through a particle beam. Let's say I have a beam of electron to go through the two holes. Very surprisingly, the electrons can also follow the same way. For example, electrons, they don't just go straight and hit the screen. They actually can interfere and form the intensity like this. And that's how we know electrons also behave like a wave. And so as for other small subatomic particles, neutron behave the same, proton behave the same. That's how we know neutrons and protons, they both can behave like a wave. Now, how do we know that those are the particles? How do we know? Sometimes you hear people saying light is a particle, electron is a particle, because particles will have something called momentum. That means when two particles collide each other, they can change the direction and they can change the energy in certain direction when there is a collision, and especially when there is an elastic collision. So what happens is, we know that when two electrons collide together, they're going to change direction. We can understand that, no problem. How do we know that light, when it hits a particle, it can also change direction or lose its momentum? So that is a very surprising. So let's say we have an electron over here, and it will bombard with light. And we know that, for example, light initially is with one wavelength. After the collision, it actually lost its momentum and have another wavelength. So it changes, go in the other direction. We call that scattering. So from this one experiment, it is the Compton's experiment. We can tell we can tell that light also behave like a particle, and we call those particles photons. This is a light particle. It's called photons. So there is a way to describe the energy of a photon. So energy is equal to a Planck constant times the frequency of the photon. Planck constant, H, is a Planck's constant. It is equal to 6 point, roughly equal to this number, times 10 to the negative 34 joules per second. Okay, so let me make it clear right now, because before you have heard about intensity or the amplitude of a wave. How do we differentiate energy and amplitude? Because this is related to its intensity. Okay, so I'm going to give you, to make it clear, if you want to increase the amplitude of light, you are going to see the light become brighter. That's changing in amplitude. For example, if you have red color, very dim, but you make it very, very bright red, so you're increasing its intensity. So what happened with the energy over here? With the energy, if you want to increase the photon, the energy of the photon, instead of making it very bright, you're going to change the frequency, which means you change the color of the light. So let's say you change from red to green. In this case, yes, you are changing the energy of the photon. Okay, but if you just make it the same color and make it very bright red, that means you are changing only the amplitude. Okay, let's look at some exercise. Number 1, which of the following is correct? Okay, C is the speed of light. Speed of light should be equal to frequency times wavelength. That's why I picked D over here. All right, number 2, which one of the following is considered to be ionizing radiation? Okay, visible light, radio wave, X-ray, yes, microwave, infrared, So C is your answer.